I'll call the meeting of the Green Bay Economic Development Authority to order. Roll call. Sikich is here. Mr. Becker is excused. Borley.
Here.
Alderman Dwayne is excused. Genrick.
Here.
Hilgenberg.
Here.
Vogel.
Here.
Okay, item number 2, is there a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Genrick, seconded by Borley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried. And item 3, approval of our minutes from the last meeting, September 9th, 2015.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Borley, seconded by Vogel. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Okay, items for action. Item number 4, request by staff to amend Interstate 43 Business Center PUD, changing zoning of parcel 21-171-2 from entertainment district to light manufacturing. Staff recommendation, formally request plan commission action. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. This is a parcel that we've talked about a few times before here at this committee. Up on the map is I-43 Business Center. The city owns some land at the very far east end of that. This parcel before the question 21-171-2. Let's get it right here. This is a parcel at the southwest corner of Mason Street and Erie Road. In the PUD right now, it is zoned entertainment district, which is akin to like where the movie theater is up along I-43. It's been entertainment district for, I think, since it was created. I don't think it's ever been changed. We've had zero interest, in my term, I know it's been short here, but just kind of historically in entertainment uses for this parcel. We have had of late some more interest in industrial uses. It goes for this parcel and goes across the city. So with that, it's our parcel, so we would be the ones making the request to Plan Commission to change the zoning for this PUD, the whole business centers in the PUD, changing it from light entertainment, or excuse me, entertainment
Right,
to
right.
light manufacturing.
Well, that seems to make a lot of sense. In fact, Mike, I have no idea. Was someone looking at that once at one time, and we went ahead with?
I think the reason, there was two things I remember was, one was the layout of the land, and there was a fair amount of wetlands. And it kind of broke it up that it would have to be some sort of an office park or retail center. And then it was fronting the now, which is their extended Mason Street, thinking that there would be retail development along the Mason Street section. But I think the focus really of retail is more towards the interstate where it is right now. And maybe there's if we work with, by changing it and working with the wetland issues, that, it can be marketed in light industrial. So it's not, because really Huron Road is your retail now, and obviously the cluster around the interchange. So I think that's the reason why at the time.
It was a buffer for the neighborhood that was there.
That was a long time ago. Well, not long, but probably 15 years ago.
Yeah, when I read this, I thought, what? I didn't even know that was zoned entertainment. Any other discussion? Is there a motion to request the staff to amend parcel 21-172-2 from entertainment to light manufacturing?
So moved.
Moved by Vogel, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Genrick. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Item 5, request by staff to apply for a Brownfields revolving loan fund grant from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Staff recommendation, direct staff to prepare and apply for the grant.
So we would like to apply for an EPA revolving loan funds grant, which would enable us to provide loans and sub-grants to developers interested in remediating or cleaning up contaminated brownfield sites in Green Bay. The cap for this grant is $1 million, and there's an $8.5 million pool which we can apply for. There is a cost share requirement of 20%, but that can be passed on to the loan recipient or the grantee. And we haven't completely decided how we'd like to work that in our application. There is a number of potential sites that this could benefit in the city of Green Bay, particularly large idle sites, gas stations, certainly sites like Larson Green or Packerland or something along that realm. And the application requires a 15-page narrative, commitment letters from community organizations, a letter from the WDNR, and a legal opinion that shows that we have the ability to manage an RLF, which we have already proven through our
Right.
CDBG RLF, and we already have existing EPA grants, but this would be another way to leverage that funding, so.
So what's the downside?
The downside is the amount of time that it'll take me
Take to put it
to apply
together,
for the
yeah.
grant.
I mentioned also that we can use it for asbestos cleanup there, so.
Right, yeah, it can be used for asbestos abatement
really?
as well as
Okay.
hazardous substances and petroleum.
This is not for, you, just cleanup, no land acquisition, no,
No,
but it can be piggybacking a developer who acquires the property and then he contributes and the grant can be
Right.
part of that process along with, I don't know what PECFA's status is anymore, but,
this
all right.
grant very nicely complements some of our other tools that we have in the economic development department already. We have the assessment grant, so we can go in and find out what's wrong. And sometimes that could stop a development from happening once we know how challenged a property is. So this is one way for some of our particularly challenged parcels to be able to have another way for funding, because banks are not going to fund cleanup-related things. And so this would help with some of those developments on those projects where they would actually have a funding source that we could work with them on these funds. And then, of course, when they pay it back, it's kind of a neat thing because then it's available for another project. And so it just kind of, just like our revolving loan would work as well. It's going to be providing a gap in some of the
Sure.
developments that we find that just cannot make that development happen.
What's the timing? When do you apply? When do we find out if we?
The grant is due on December 18th. So apply right now.
Right now.
And, I'm not sure exactly when we find out.
Okay. Okay. And will we have a time limit to use those funds or, distribute the funds or
So there's a 5-year project timeline.
5-year? Okay.
And is this a brand new opportunity or something that the department has experience with previously?
We have experience with other EPA grants, which
Mhm.
I think they're all supposed to sort of build off of each other. So the assessment grant would lead to either a cleanup or revolving loan grant,
Right.
which we haven't received either one of those grants. Cleanup grants are hard to go after because you have to own the site and you have to be the applicant and you have to own the site, so it couldn't go to a private development. But the RLF can, and we don't have any incentives in the city currently to redevelop or remediate sites aside from the assessment. So this is really a big opportunity to really get some work going on our sites that need it the most.
Right. Any sense for the likelihood of the city landing the grant?
It's hard to say, but I do think that we have a long-standing relationship with the EPA, and that will help, and we've proven to be successful with our previous EPA grants, and that will help. Also, one thing they judge the grant on is how much of the funding can be used towards petroleum cleanup, and on our previous grants, we have used a considerable amount of funding for that, whereas other communities have struggled. So I do think that we have a relatively decent shot at this, and that it will prove fruitful if we win it, so.
Great.
I make a motion,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Nick.
A motion to direct staff to prepare and apply for this grant.
Moved by Borley, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vogel. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Good luck. Go get it. Item 6, request by Jim Sanderson to consider purchasing the only remaining Fort Howard building at 412 and 14 North Maple Avenue and move it back to its original site on city-owned property at 331, 349 Donald Driver Way. Staff recommendation, direct staff to work with the Historic Preservation Committee and report back to the EDA. Kevin?
Yes, so this is a request that came through a council communication from Alderman Zimra and Mr. Sanderson. They're here this evening if they would like to open the floor to hear from them and just in terms of their perspective. This was, communication originally was directed towards HBC and EDA. I believe with EDA, their role in terms of providing financing, should this city be interested in acquiring the property, that EDA would be the mechanism for looking at doing the actual purchase of the property.
Oh, I see.
moving the property.
Okay.
With that, the home is here, just on North Maple Street. With that, the Historic Preservation Commission has been discussing this project in some detail in their last 2 meetings. They've come through some preliminary analyses of this. Right now, I would just direct staff to work with HPC. Getting to the actual numbers, we're not quite there yet. So in terms of for our department to analyze, would this be worth the investment of purchasing the property, moving the structure, looking at both, the end use of the parcel on which it came and the parcel to which it's going to go, what's the economic impact of that. It's a little premature right now, but I think the HPC has been doing a good job of kind of reviewing and seeing where things are at. And again, I said Alderman Zima and Mr. Sanderson are here if you want to open up the floor and hear from them as well.
Well, I'm all for historic preservation. I guess my only question was any discussion as far as the future use at that site, or?
I'd make a motion to suspend the
Okay.
rules.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Gendrick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The future of that, any plans yet for what that would be? Was it?
It's in the developing stages, of course, but it's kind of incredible, this building is intact, and underneath the siding that's there now is the original siding.
Wow.
And we have, who was the gentleman that went and looked at the property with you, that verified that it is the,
Is that Jason Platt?
Oh, the last tour that we,
no, the fellow who knows the property.
They had a person from
Gary
Heritage House, right?
Korstein?
Or no,
Mr. Hayward?
Yeah.
Hayward, that's it. We know that this is a real thing. This
Yeah.
is not just, is it really or isn't it? It really is. And it's sort of incredible that it's been overlooked all this time. And I know the owner of the property has owned it for quite a long time and was approached at one time to sell it. But at the time, they were offering him about half of what he thought it was worth, and
he was approached by Heritage Hill back in '75,
Oh, wow.
and they were only willing to pay him $40,000, which he said the very most he could have bought a duplex for that. He wanted to be made whole, to be able to get another 4-apartment property. Instead, they decided to build a replica of it out at Heritage Hill. But they had interest in it, but they were saying that the renovation of it, to bring it back to its original 1830s appearance, were gonna really drive the price up. And I personally don't believe it needs to go back to that appearance. The building, every 50 to 60 years, it's had architectural changes to it. Around the turn of the century, it had a lot of Victorian woodwork and windows put into it. In 1950, a full back second-story shed dormer was put on it. But the front of the building, the 2 window dormers up on the roof and the porch overhang are basically, exactly as they were back in the, early 1800s. That part of it's intact. I don't believe it needs to be brought back to its exact condition. It does need some work, but
I think I come back to close, but I don't know, my thoughts, and Jim can elucidate on it, but my vision is that, hey, Fort Howard is what the west side of the river was called. We had Fort Howard paper, Fort Howard is part of our history. And here there is one piece of the original Fort Howard that still exists. And so why can't we buy this property, move it, restore it as practical as possible, right on that site, which would be kind of behind the Titletown restaurant there. And, you know, make it a tourist attraction to a certain extent, and maybe an information center. Something, some semi-practical use, but basically it's a draw. History is something that people are interested in. And I think if we can make that a kind of a combination information center, kind of a little mini museum, and, you know, if we have to subsidize it to the form of, you know, some employee there for the months of the year that you think are deemed necessary, but get it, put a kind of little fence around it, and there's a stone that Jim can tell you about that's sitting over there on Chestnut Street, and maybe we can put a sign around it that and talk about the Fort Howard, which, you know, give information about the fort, and if we can get any what's the word I'm looking for?
Funding?
Well, you might be able to get some
guns or
historical
whatever.
tax credits or
Well,
something.
yeah.
What was the impetus behind this? Did you guys stumble across this,
I
or?
found out through some map overlays that some professional historian, well, professional, but historians that have knowledge of surveying got a hold of the original Chicago Northwestern survey map that they hired a professional surveyor back in the 1860s to show everything that was currently on the land before they were going to put the railroad yard over that spot. And they had a very detailed diagram showing where all the fort buildings were. And that piece of land where this building was for the last 150 years has either been covered over by railroad uses or the cannery operations. Now that that's all, that area's been cleared, miraculously, the very almost exact spot. Now, if you were to put this where it actually came from, it would be in Donald Driver Drive, but basically you'd be putting this building in what would have been the backyard of it. And I mean, it's an opportunity that hasn't been available for 150 years. That building, if it was put back where it was on that section, it would be a very prominent, visible reference point for people to know where the fort was. Most people have no idea. The fort has, you know, a large stone referring to it over on Dawson Street, but it's always all these measurements and difficult to understand directions. At one time there was an elm tree in the railroad yard that was known as the Fort Howard elm. That's obviously been gone for a long time. This building would give everybody a complete knowledge of where the fort was, because the stockade of this was outside the stockade. The stockade of the fort, part of the railroad right away goes over the top of where the stockade walls were, so you really can't recreate the fort footprint, but this building's footprint is there. I mean, it hasn't been, like I said, 150 years, it hasn't been available. You know, if that piece of land wasn't available there, I wouldn't really be pushing it. It's like, where are you gonna put it? If you put it anywhere else, it's not authentic. If this was done, where else have you ever heard of a historic building that's moved back to its original spot? This could probably make national news. I mean, especially since it's a historic military building. You know, I mean, it's just a very unique situation.
What's
that
important too, though, is that you actually, the gentleman who owns it is grown older. He's willing to sell it and at the, more or less the assessed value, plus maybe some consideration of a year's worth of rent or something like that, that he would, you know, you take the assessed value is about $120,000. Well, you take $120,000, you don't get any return on your investment for that. You can't put it away for interest or anything like that. So, but he's growing a little bit older. I shouldn't say he's probably younger than I am, but not much. But and he seems willing to, at this point in his life, to give it up for a historic purpose for a reasonable price, a price that's not gouging anybody or anything like that. So yeah, I guess we're here for try to get your blessing
Sure.
to move ahead with this
Sure.
and be willing to
Sure.
help put some money toward it. Now,
Yeah.
you know, there's some folks that think that that fundraising will pay for part or
Yeah.
if not all of it.
Yeah.
But we have to, you know, get it going. And I think it's a rare opportunity and that we're just thankful that this building really wasn't
Yeah. And that-
completely
Going.
torn apart or demolished or anything else. And like I said, the original siding is still there. So it's something pretty authentic, and I think we need to identify where that fort was here. That had a very pivotal point in our history. You know, it was important to maintain the power in the area. at the
It's
time.
what brought on the European settlers coming to this area. That the fort was put there. There was fear that the Indians were going to be a opposition force. Well, they weren't, so the fort really wasn't there to do battle with the Native Indians that were here. It was basically like most forts, became a trading post. But everything that piece of land along the river between Dousman and Mather, that's extremely important to the history of this area, and it's gotten almost no attention. You know, it's been an industrial area. I mean, when the railroad was brought here, they needed a railroad in this area. Railroads back then were like everybody's, you know, coveted, you know, business to bring. That's why they gave up the area where the fort was. But you gotta think about this building. This building is the oldest building in Green Bay. It's older than Hazelwood by a couple of years. It was the last building that was built for the whole fort ensemble. It wasn't inside the stockade, like I said. It was to the south of the stockade. But there's detailed documents that show where it was in that area in reference to where the depot was built. So, I mean, we have the oldest building in Green Bay. You know, there's nothing older than that. I mean, besides the history of it, it's just something that needs to be protected. There needs to be, thankfully, over the years of it having tenants, no one's burned it down, you know, but it's the only thing that's not in Heritage Hill that is part of the original fort setup that was along the river there.
And they don't have an interest, they don't have room for it, or they were at the meeting, they were supportive of the idea of us preserving this and maybe making a project out of it. So there's no conflict between Heritage Hill and our request here today. But I think, I mean, if we can buy that and move it and restore it, make some kind of use out of it,
Right.
and it becomes an attraction, it becomes a point of interest, it's something that helps preserve your city, really.
Right,
The land on Donald Driver
We're throwing out
Drive.
way too many things in the city of Green Bay.
right.
And, you know, we can take a step back in time and put it there, and you can put the history of the fort and pictures of it, and, you know, drawings and everything else within it, and become a little educational tool, but I think it can have a practical use as maybe perhaps a tourist information area for the city, as well as an attraction. So I guess we're looking for your blessing and your recommendation to go forward.
It's not the property acquisition is not really pricey. The land on Donald Driver Drive is valued at $65,000. That building, the very maximum that would probably, if the loss of rental income was added into it, that'd be about 136,000. So the whole thing, all the property acquisition, just in and of itself, would probably be around the $200,000 range.
Okay. Any other questions?
Motion to return to regular.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Genders. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Any further discussion?
I guess the one thing that we haven't talked about that I think I should add in is that, you know, the land now is in the hands of, what's the green called?
Larson Green?
The bank,
Larson's Green.
Perfect.
And, you know, it's in their control, and somehow I think we need to reserve that piece, ask that it be, ask the Larson Green to sell it back to us, or give it to us, donate it to us, get it preserved so that it isn't used for other type of development.
Right.
That we get a big enough piece that we can set it on and do the things we want. So I think that's one positive recommendation you could make, that we reacquire the city's ownership totally of that parcel that's needed to set this house on.
Right. Well, I think that's something that you'll be working with Historic Preservation Commission on, citing it, potential funding to do this, future use.
Correct. So the parcels in question, the 331, I believe it is, to 349 Donald Driver Way, those are owned by On Broadway and governed by the Larson Governing Board. That's this slot of them right here. And part of, without going into the whole process of the property and foreclosure and agreement to buy it out, DDL Holdings, who owns the adjacent properties and the building where the cannery is and the tap room is slated to close on these properties. They're under
really?
contract to purchase these properties as part of a workout agreement.
Would you say that again now?
They are under contract. They will be acquiring, DDL Holdings will be acquiring these properties. on
Who is
Friday.
DL Holdings?
DDL Holdings is an investment group that's responsible
Titletown
for
Brewery.
Titletown Brewery.
Well,
the tap
it's
room.
time, this is why I think it's important that we get that back. And
They're under contract, you said.
Correct. So that, I mean, they're already under contract to purchase that from the bank. And so that, with that in the overall plan for this area, in the interim, they will be using that as a parking lot. But for the future, it's not to say that this project could not be incorporated somewhere
Well,
into this spot or the development in
I
the
think,
future.
Mr. Wonka, it's important that you go get that reverse there. They obviously don't have any building plans at this point in time.
Kevin,
I
are
talked
they?
to Mr. Weicker, and like I said to you earlier, I talked to Mr. Weicker in July. Him and his partner from Smith toured the Maple Building. They were not opposed to that building being put there. They said they didn't have any immediate plans for that. First of all, they didn't own it at the time, and they were more focused on the area where Walmart was gonna build. That area there, they've just recently sealed it off with parking stops. It's a big green space. It was being used for green space parking, but now it's not even being used for that.
Well, I think the you need to intervene as quickly as possible. Because, I mean, you don't want to result in the extreme to having to condemn a property for a public purpose, use the city's condemnation power to get something back. There isn't anything going there right now. They're interested in the property, but I think that property, what's needed to move this site has got to be negotiated back to us, or, they can reduce their purchase. If we have to substitute the cost or whatever it is to on Broadway. This is too big of an opportunity to be lost. If you don't have something that resembles the original site and make something of it, you're forever lost. You build apartment buildings in it, and it's gone. Then it doesn't make any difference where this thing, they might as well tear it down. But I mean, do we really want to tear down the oldest building in Green Bay? Do we want to just leave it, go to rental units and further remodeling or whatever might happen to it? This is like a kind of a once in a 150-year opportunity to try to turn something around. I think we have to dedicate anything that would bring that history to that area. It's an attraction that's going to help the businesses of those areas. This is going to be an attraction. This is going to be something people want to see. It's going to bring people to that area. And of course, then they see the museum, they see other things. I think it would just be, just a tragedy, really, to have suddenly, I don't know, build some condos on it or something. There's too big of opportunity for us here to have something that will be a permanent resource to that community there, to that area. I think we have to do all we can to try to want to bring people to that area. And this is, I can't think of anything better. It's just like, boy, I have to thank Mr. Sanderson. He's just, this is a guy who kind of knows every house in Green Bay, if you want to believe it or not. And he's been festering about this property, and he brought it to my attention. I said, no, we're going to go and try to do this. The time is now. It's really now. We can't let this, there's plenty of area there to develop. We all know that. It's been sitting there dead for a long time. It's been sitting there dead for a long time, and we have something that's very positive that would be a complement to anything that goes there. So I really think if that's a motion you can make, that the city go to try to retain that property and do whatever negotiations are necessary to put a parcel big enough that was part of the old site, and at least in the short term here, reserve it so that we could go forward. We're going to have our
Next year's gonna be the 200th. Next year's gonna be the 200th. Next year's gonna be the 200th anniversary of the installation of Fort Howard. That's part of the timing for this thing. Timing is the land that's available, and also what is Green Bay gonna do to recognize the 200th anniversary of the installation of Fort Howard? Have a parade? I mean, this is something we can really, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't make the national news, because you don't see historical buildings return to their original sites. It doesn't happen. This is a very unique, all around, this is just a completely unique situation that we just really, if we pass on it, it's going to be a travesty. People complain about what was done to the downtown in the 60s and in the early 80s. Well, this is going to be in the same category. We had an opportunity to really focus on an important piece of history, and we just said it wasn't important enough. I mean, the only history that people care around here is Packers. And the name Fort Howard was important around here, long before the name the Packers was. So, I mean, everybody talks about Fort Howard. We have the ability to give a physical reference point saying just to the north of this building was the stockade. If that building isn't there, no one's going to know where the stockade. Oh, you can put some fancy flagpoles saying this is the outline where the fort was. Is that going to really mean anything?
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Would it be appropriate to make a motion to direct staff to work with the historic preservation group and report to the EDA?
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Vogel. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Could you
Kevin?
make a-
Great project.
Could you make a further motion about getting negotiations completed to return that property to the city so that we can have it reserved for this purpose?
Well, I think that's going to be part of the planning and the investigation that staff's going to do with
Well, I
the
think
Historic Preservation
if you give
Commission.
your approval to that idea, verbalize it in a motion, maybe not a command,
Yeah.
but that
Sure. Well, I
they
think
work
there's,
to do that.
Can you amend the
I think it
motion
needs
just
to
to
be
say that
referenced.
you'll also talk to DDL Properties and see if they're what their interest is?
Yeah, I mean, that's my intent as part of this. In terms
Right.
of, part of this is also there's some negotiations where the city is not involved in terms of this is a transaction between the bank and a private party.
Well, didn't the city, with Larson's Green, wasn't it a joint effort between the city and on Broadway?
Correct. There's a governing board.
And so, and the governing board has 3 members that are I believe you're a member, aren't you?
Correct.
And our finance director, and who's the third person?
City appointed ones,
City attorney?
no.
Danziger?
Or was an alderman at one
Alderman
time?
Danziger. Alderman Danziger.
Mr. Danziger. And so I just, you know, hey, we're involved, of course, you know, I don't know how the bank has let the city get by without paying interest for the last year. They're doing their community service, I guess. But I think, you know, the city is part of that. Of course, the bank wants its money back. There was a $3 million note that was guaranteed by the city. And I tell you, the offer from Walmart for this whole property was $4.5 million at the time. That isn't really well known.
Well, I think what we need to do is to move forward.
And I tell you,
Motion is to see-
Walmart would have donated this piece of land in a heartbeat. And so I don't care what Titletown is thinking about, it's time for us, if we have to use condemnation powers, and I'm talking a little radically here. But it is really important that we make it known that this is our desire. That's why I'm asking you to verbalize it in the form of a motion that they work, that the staff work with DL Enterprise, whatever it's called,
Well,
to
we can-
return that,
Should
to
we,
work
we'll
toward
amend the
returning that
motion
to
to
the
work
city.
with DNL Enterprises to.
And the
look-
historic event.
And historic preservation.
But
So do you want to amend
to
amend
put
your
that
motion,
property
Susan?
back into
Yes.
city control.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Would-
So
would-
we're amending the motion to work with DNL,
DDL.
DL.
But I think you need to say something about returning the property to the city for this purpose.
Well,
If you're really, I'm not saying that
That's what
that we're gonna do
historic
Yeah,
that.
and we're not in a position to do that tonight. I think we're gonna have staff look into it, look into all the other issues. There's so many unknowns here, Guy. I mean, we gotta take a look at it and see, you know, what costs are, if the property is available, if it's not available, what the next steps are. I think tonight, all we can do is recommend that we have staff work with the landowner and historic preservation and come back to us with recommendation and a plan.
But I just don't find in your motion that you all seem interested in this, but you haven't made in your motion the commitment that that's what you want to happen.
I don't know if we're ready to do that yet.
Well, we're here to ask you to do that. That's what we're here
Well,
for.
I don't think we're ready then.
Your first words, Mr. Skitch, I'm sorry.
Not even close.
Just as a
Sickage.
point of order,
Stickage, okay.
I would be cautious about just a recommendation that the city actually acquire this property, just in terms of the way this is presented.
Exactly, and the way it's on the agenda, exactly.
I mean, if you'd like to
We don't have
consider
the
that at the next
information.
meeting.
Well, I'm just reminding you of your first words out of your mouth, were that you're all for
I am.
historic preservation.
I am.
And so I think, you know, there's been a pretty good case made here for something really positive to happen.
I don't think anybody's
None
in
of us, no one
disagreement.
disagrees with anything
But
you
we need to
said.
follow the
But we're
proper-
I
not
just don't
ready,
want to
we're
refer
not
to
ready
staff and, Schmidt Construction, oh boy, I wouldn't want to interfere with their plans right there. This has been an empty site for a long time.
Oh, I think we're all well aware of that, sir.
And it's important that we preserve this piece. This is not, shouldn't have any problem. There's a lot of land there. There's what, 16 and a half acres or whatever? We're talking about, what's the parcel size here, about half
Well, I
acre,
think
something like that?
Alderman Denziger, is that correct? Is he on that committee? I think you could work with him and start building a coalition of people to make this process move forward. And what we did tonight was continue on that process and direct the staff, and let's get the data, and let's get the facts, and let's find out what exactly we can and cannot do and move forward.
And
with
we
it.
don't
We're trying
disagree
to do
with
that.
anything you've been saying. I
just
think
think if
The
we're
thing
all,
is that
we're
the
all for
public
it.
really
but-
doesn't even know this is going on. This building has been referred to as the best kept secret. I mean, the best known secret in the west side. Everybody knows about it and they know that it's history, but it's not officially the building that it is. It's just, you know, the interest in this building is immense from what I've been finding out. Everybody knows it's there. It's like, it's the little building that got left behind, but thankfully it did get left behind.
That's a good article, segue into an article. If you guys could contact the media and the press and get some
I
articles
mean, this is
written.
the caption for this thing is "History Comes Home." That's what I
Right.
figured.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, I think this would be a significant storyline in the media that something is being brought back to where it came from.
That'd be a great idea.
Well,
We
the
don't-
Historic
we don't
Preservation
disagree.
Committee,
We
just-
don't
just so
disagree,
you
Mr.
understand,
Chairman.
committee members, the
Hey, Guy, I
Historic
think
Pres-
everybody up here is interested in pursuing
Yes,
this
exactly.
and would
Well, I was looking
endorse
for
it.
something a little stronger.
But I
on
don't think
your-
there's
on your motion.
anything we can do. I mean, because our function isn't gonna make anything happen other than we would like to recommend that staff move forward to make this happen.
Well,
Is that,
Mr. Hildenberg, you know how much I respect you, and I agree with every word you're saying, but I learned a long time ago, if you don't ask for something, you don't get it. And I just was looking for something a little stronger in your motion and say that this is a, make some kind of statement that this is a desirable idea and we want it pursued, and we want to, at least in the short term, preserve this land if we can.
This could even be.
Otherwise, things don't happen. It gets, you know, things just get into the dustbin. But the Historic Preservation Committee has come on board with this. The chairman has said he wants to see this happen. And there was no one in that room the night this was discussed. No one. And we had people from Heritage Hill, et cetera, there. And then, you know, I first thought, well, those are going to be enemies, maybe. They weren't. They were people who thought it was a good idea, and it was not in conflict with what they want to do. And we're just, you know, I'm sorry to be so emotional here, but this is, I think it's once in a lifetime chance here. And we just can't blow it. We just can't blow it. And again, Mr. Sanderson.
There's two important anniversaries, the 200th anniversary of the installation of the fort, and then there's in 18, it's the 200th anniversary of the founding of Brown County. This project could dovetail both of those anniversaries. I mean, the timing of this thing is so brilliant, but it's like nobody knows about it.
We're not against it. You know, we just need more information. And that's all, I think we're all agreeing that that's all we can do tonight, is get some more information, have a little more study. This is the first time we've seen this. We need more info.
That you're giving your blessing to this project, and
Our-
you'd like
our-
to see it happen.
Our
I think by
motion,
saying that we want them to go back to get more information, it says that we're interested in looking at this again. We don't have
Exactly.
any information in front of us.
exactly.
You can stand there and tell us that the Historic Preservation Fund behind, it. We don't know that.
Correct, and that
I
from there.
mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful either, but we don't have any facts in front of us.
Well, were you there that night, Dave?
With that, let's go to item 7, Director's Report.
I was there for part of the meeting, not for the whole meeting, and they have.
Do you have anything?
They have a
Do we need you to
report
gavel?
on it.
No,
I didn't have a copy of it.
Other than if you haven't noticed, I've served as interim director for Kim Flom planning, just since she left, so I've been kind of doing the dual duty.
Oh, I didn't
type
know.
of, so-
When did she leave?
Oh, you didn't know Kim left?
Yeah, she's in De Pere.
Oh, okay.
So in reverse,
Landed
Kim
New
Flom
Leaf
left
Market.
at the end of September.
No kidding. She took the leave, Mark.
Yeah.
I saw that, and I was wondering what happened. So, okay, well, okay, we appreciate that.
So
I'm sorry.
other than that, I have no other.
Is the floor still open for a second? Mr. Mindel would like to.
The floor's
He was the editor
Well,
of
it's
Historical
not
Magazine.
open.
It hasn't been open for the
No.
last 15 minutes.
No.
No, we just, actually, we just had our last agenda item, and we're about to adjourn.
Well, would you like to hear from one more person on that?
Go ahead.
Thanks. Mr. Zima asked me to comment on this because I was at the Historic Preservation Commission on Monday. My name is Bill Mindel, 125 West Mission Road. And I have a background in local history. At the Historic Preservation Commission Monday night, they did not make a decision on this matter. It came up for discussion. It was talked about for maybe 20 minutes, a half hour. They did not make any recommendation on it. But the sense of the discussion was that there is not necessarily
I
support.
guess I'm thinking of the meeting before it. I wasn't at the last one there. That's probably why, you know, they need a guiding light over there. But the meeting before that, I didn't know if you were at that.
I was not at that meeting, I was at the meeting Monday.
That's where they.
And what did they say?
So
Monday's meeting?
I spoke a little out of turn. The last meeting they had was just a few days ago. And that wasn't the one I was speaking of. It was the previous meeting that they had, and the Historical Society was there, Heritage Hill. All people were interested in it, and there was nothing but enthusiasm for the idea. And I'm sorry, Mr. Meidel, I guess you weren't at that one, so I was asking you to affirm something that you weren't at, and I apologize for that.
Do you want me to continue? Sure. Well, the discussion, even though they did not make a decision, discussion Monday night was not necessarily supportive of moving the building. A number of local historic preservation people have toured the building, spent 2 hours going through it and investigating the matter. And as I recall the discussion, their concern was that moving the building would, the effect that would have on the existing neighborhood, on its existing site. Also, they said the building has more of a history at its current site right now than it does as part of Fort Howard, because it was moved approximately in the 1860s or 70s. So for a far longer period of time, it's been at the Chestnut or Maple Avenue site. Maple Avenue site than it has been, than it was at the Fort Howard site along the Fox River. That was part of the discussion. Trying to remember some other facets of it, but James Hayward, who has done work for Heritage Hill State Park, went through it. The consultant, the staff member for the Historic Preservation Commission member, Jason Flatt, toured the building, I believe, as well, and some other people as well. And the consensus of the discussion was that it should not be moved, but they did not make any formal decision on the matter.
Appreciate
Well, I
it.
gotta-
And they also, it was mentioned that the cost of the project could be, to move it, to purchase it and relocate it could be in the vicinity of $500,000. And there was a question of where would the money come from. So that was part of the
That was
discussion.
discussed at the previous meeting, and they said it could rise as high as that. But Mr. Hayward, who's, the historical consultant on it, he said that he didn't feel there would be any problem raising the money in the community. He felt that, probably wouldn't have to have any money from the taxpayers on it, but, the least the taxpayers can do is try to preserve the site, is my feeling. Now, I don't know, if I was at that meeting, I would have never let them get by with that, it was said. What are they talking about? It's been longer at its present site, which is nothing, and it could be returned to its original site as the last building of Fort Howard there. I think that's way more important. And I don't know what Nutburger would say that leaving it in that neighborhood of older houses that are, just rental units is somehow historic grandeur. It certainly isn't. So I don't know, but sometimes the chairman there, he sometimes lacks the force. And that's why I'm trying to get this thing on the plate.
That building
Appreciate
is
that.
at risk every time a new tenant moves in there who could potentially burn it down, and it's just a miracle. It's been sitting there for 150 years, and it's available,
It's an at-risk building.
The front
there a motion to
porch
adjourn?
that used to look out to the river is now
Moved by
looking
Volkels, a
across to
second, second by
other
Gainer. All in favor,
houses.
say aye. Aye. Carried.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, well,
Okay,
guys,
guys. I think you gotta get the meeting